Afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Gustavo Spadotti. I'm head of office in Embrapa Territorial from Campinas, Brazil, one of the 43 decentralized units of Embrapa. And it's a pleasure to be here, not only for all of you here, the authorities here at the GAF and the audience here, but mainly to talk about sustainability. It's a subject that is so dear to us, so important for the past, for the present, but mostly for the future of Brazilian agricultural and livestock segment. It's a subject that is being discussed by everyone, and it has heat discussions, some discussions that need to be transformed not only into actions, but not only into speeches, but mainly into actions. Some concrete actions that can show the power that we have to transform the agricultural and livestock segment into a more sustainable industry. In Brazil, I have a very good opportunity in this scenario because while many countries are still studying and discussing sustainability, Brazil has a history of research, development, innovation, translated into concrete actions that have already been implemented in our country to seek a balance between production and environmental preservation. This is what we're going to discuss during this panel today. And we have the presence and participation of Bruno Lucchi. He's the technical director of CNA, the National Agricultural Confederation. Vinicius Biagi is the president of Instituto Nova Era, and Christian Lohbauer is the president of CropLife Brazil. All of them are going to bring the most modern perspectives in terms of concrete actions that already are being implemented in the agricultural sector in Brazil, and also think about solutions for the future to overcome the technological bottlenecks that we have and how we can strengthen more and more the image of Brazil as a great player in terms of production and environmental protection. Embrapa Territorial, of which I'm the head of office, has a clear mission, a mission related to working for the Brazilian state as a strategic instrument in terms of intelligence, monitoring, and supervision of our territory, focusing on the competitiveness and sustainability of agricultural production of the country, to support the Brazilian state and private initiatives so that we're able to produce food, fibers, and energy in balance with the environment. For that, we have a strategic territorial intelligence system. This system collects information from 5 pillars: natural, agricultural, socio-economical, to bring the best diagnosis for our territory and find the territories with the same type of problems and with the same types of potential to leverage sustainable development. Therefore, Embrapa has hardware, cutting-edge software and infrastructure to work with this immense volume of data that we have. But mostly we have brainware. These are people who are qualified and dedicated and competent to work with these territories, to translate this huge volume of big data into right data, into precise information, accurate information at the right time to support the decision-making of public and private agents. This is transforming data in information. And information has value. And the only piece of information that I'm going to bring to you here today, I'm going to be really brief here with this introduction, is one slide that I would like to show now, where you can have an idea of what is the territorial dimension of the use and occupation, land use and occupation here in Brazil. This chart, we call it cheese pie here in Brazil. It shows the role of rural producers and the role of Brazilian state in terms of protecting and preserving natural vegetation in our country. Today we have 66.3% of our territory preserved conserved or protected, this is not by chance. This is due to the dedication of the Brazilian state, which marked the native indigenous lands in almost 3% of our territory. Excuse me, almost 14% of our territory, which marked conservation units, almost 10% of our territory, and that created the Brazilian Forestry Code, which is a forestry law that is now 10 years since its establishment, and allowed rural producers to participate in this process of preserving native vegetation in their land. And also the rural registration, we know that these rural producers dedicate from their land approximately 33.2% of the whole national territory to preserve their native vegetation. They get this part of their lands to preserve the environment, ensuring the opportunity for Brazil to contributing more and more with the process of production and protecting the environment, showing that in our country we have a good balance between balance and preservation regarding native vegetation, using 30% of our territory for production and 63.3% for protecting and preservation. So this is the size of the dimensions of the areas preserved by our producers. But this is not only issue that we may raise here. I would like to ask our participants here to detail concrete practices that have been implemented in the Brazilian agricultural segment and livestock segment as well. This is going to be the subject of our debate here. So first I would like to call my friend Bruno Lucchi from CNA to give his presentation and his introduction and discuss the subjects related to our panel here. So Bruno, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Hi, good afternoon, Gustavo. Thank you for your introduction, your kind introduction. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today. I had an unexpected situation, but CNA has been working with the subject, and I'm glad to be here online with you. First, I would like to congratulate you with the great work you have done with Embrapa Territorial. We're directly related in several actions to improve the competitiveness of our sector. And Vinicius Biagi, who I have the pleasure to meet at least virtually now. I'd like to thank as well all the organizers of this event. A lot of great content and knowledge, and we're going to have a rich debate about the subject. Well, I think that first I'd like to divide my presentation in 3 points. First, state that Brazilian agricultural segment is sustainable. We're able to produce and preserve as only a few countries in the world. Second point that I would like to discuss is that why, if we have a sustainable agricultural segment, why is there a big difficulty in internationally to people to understand this and assimilate this? And finally, what would be the actions that we could work with, like Gustavo mentioned, to seek continuous improvement? What could we work with over this period to achieve these levels of sustainability that are required by the international community? So regarding the first subject that I stated, that Brazilian agricultural segment is sustainable, the work of Embrapa is essential, and to bring science into this discussion, because there's no arguments if you have to argument against figures and facts. So it means that agricultural segment uses 30% of the territory for production. It's a small percentage in comparison to other countries. Second point that I would like to emphasize from that same pie chart, showing that 30% of the native vegetation areas are in rural properties. So this shows the commitment of Brazilian rural producers for preserving the environment. The third point I would like to address is regarding the agriculture. With the same pie chart of Embrapa, we have a lot of area destined to agricultural production. China and USA use 17, 18%. Germany 56%, and the Netherlands 66%. We have a very low percentage when compared to these countries, which are the great food and energy producers. So this is the result of research, the entrepreneurship of several producers that moved to other areas in Brazil with no urbanization or civilization to improve these areas with using the agricultural techniques and technologies. Another point that's important to emphasize is the use of water. Brazil today has such strong potential for expansion, using 3.4% of the water available. So we have 70% of the water granted used for agriculture. This corresponds 3.4% of the water lost in the oceans as well. So it's a very efficient use of such a valuable resource, which is water, when producing food products. And other points as well. Programa ABC, which was launched by the government to have actions that turn speech into actions that since 2018 exceeded 15% the goals for carbon equivalent reduction goals, showing the public policy promoted by the government based on science and having a value 15% above the goals preconized for these emissions. We are in the second phase of this program, Programa ABC+, with much more technology and more actions in the same segment. To change this, to finish this, all this information, when we talk about LPF, we have 17 million hectares. So these figures by themselves demonstrate how sustainable our agriculture is. Of course, we have a lot of homework to do. No other country, all other countries have this homework to do, but as been said in the introduction, we have a history of the development of production allied with preservation, and these figures demonstrate this. Well, what are the challenges that we have to convey this image of a highly productive and sustainable sector? What makes it difficult to convey this image, not only in Brazil, but especially abroad, because there's a lot of attacks to the Brazilian agricultural segment. And I have three segments here. Deforestation. Deforestation is harmful not for the agricultural sector, but all other sectors of the Brazilian economy that are related to deforestation, and mainly illegal deforestation. I think this is a big issue that affects the country as a whole. And there's a difference between the image between the agricultural segment and deforestation. The last piece of data shows that 0.9% of properties we've had some sort of illegal deforestation. So let's say 1%. 1% of the properties, the land that we have, had some kind of issue. And we don't want to defend here the producers who are doing illegal activities, but if there's any issue and they are not following the law, they need to be penalized, because this 1% impact all the efforts of all the other producers. And then we're going to discuss how we can mitigate this issue of deforestation. The second point I would like to discuss, which harms our image of our Brazilian agricultural sector, is the difficulty to implement the forestry code. The code is 10 years old. It's an important policy which took years of debate, hearing all sides of the story. It's been there for 10 years. The producers, the farmers have done what they need to do. They did the registration. They showed their preservation areas and their production areas, and indicating in this registration what they need to recover in terms of environmental liabilities. So they wanted to adhere to this program of environmental regulation understanding that they had some sort of liabilities. So the producers showed their interest in doing these things according to the program. And the car would be the basis for everything. It would show that Brazil follows strict and rigorous environmental laws. The producers who have liabilities, they want to regularize these issues. But if they can't do it, they need to regulate the PRA, and if they can't do it, they need to do these compensations that are permitted by law. So this is an issue that we are facing. We had 23% of the car as 23% of the car, and this validated cars less than 1%. So it's still very low figures considering the producers, and the producers want to have their full regulation, and those who have access and can use this as some environmental reserve and other benefits that they cannot obtain because of the initial analysis. And this initial analysis of the car impacts other parts of the chain as well. If we have the producers in Amazon had to sign a document, if they had the car, they could demonstrate that they wouldn't have any problem. They were following the law and the forestry code. Other issues that we're seeing, the European Union, United Kingdom, pressing on due diligence of products that originate from deforestation. So these products, in some way, it's any type of traceability you have in this chain starts with the car. If they don't have this car, then it's difficult to do this traceability, or other protocols. They may increase the income of these rural producers. So this implementation of the forestry code and validation and analysis of the car and regulation of PRA, which is basically in 15 states, there are some other states which didn't do it yet, are structural problems that really affect our image.
And the last point I would like to mention when it comes to image is the inventory of national emissions. Brazil currently is placed 7th among the countries that emit more greenhouse gases. We have around 2.8% of global emissions. That's a very small number when we compare ourselves to USA and China, who together have around 50% of these emissions. But the difficulty we have now are the methodologies that are being used in Brazil that cannot interpret our sector at a deep level. These methodologies don't consider the sequestering levels that pastures have. So there is no balance when it comes to that, when these pastures, when well managed, can sequester in terms of carbon. So when it comes to emissions, maybe we could have more appropriate methodologies that could demonstrate the potential we have in our sector, mainly now with mitigating activities and not with so many emitting activities. So this goes to show the actions that can damage the image of the Brazilian agribusiness. And now, reaching the final part of my presentation, what are the proposals that we could be debating throughout the event, which could be structuring approaches to approach the environmental issue in Brazil? We should acknowledge that this is a complex problem in Brazil. We have a country with continental dimensions, with many regional differences, and first I think we should understand these differences so that we could have a robust work to mitigate the many variables we find in this complex subject. Again, we should emphasize on the work that Embrapa does, bringing a lot of clarity to this discussion, as well mentioned by Gustavo at the beginning. Very good. So when it comes to deforestation, what would be the actions that we could be working on to prevent and fight against illegal deforestation, we should not only have a policy working on command and control, and we could also be able to integrate these things to regional development aspects. Inhabitants of northern regions that maybe are isolated, if they don't have opportunities of working legally, they will find a way of surviving. And that could be illegal livestock raising or illegal mining or deforestation or even drug trafficking. So we should give these people opportunities to get their living in a legal manner. When we look at the PLA analysis, producers will then be liable to have a environmental service program. We should consider legal possibilities for the remuneration of producers and bring benefits to them so that they can preserve the forests. At the Amazon region, when we give responsibilities to people who live there, 0.9% of the deforestation is made by producers who have CRR documentation. So we can identify producers and then charge them under the terms of the law. And with that, with this registration, producers can join public policies, they can look for technologies to better develop their activities, they can actively participate in governmental programs that give technical assistance. Anyway, producers can take part in a series of public policies when they have a legal status, and a large part of this legal status comes from the federal and state governments. Another point that we should be emphasizing is strengthening the firefighting policies. Whenever we find news of fires, wildfires, this hinders all the work that we have done, not only to our sector, but many sectors that work in a legal manner. So we should equip fire brigades. I mean, we can maybe sometimes compare ourselves to the United States, where they have helicopters that are able sometimes even to lift tractors, heavy machinery. So I believe there is a series of technologies that can strengthen field staff for the training and development of firefighting services. When we put all these things together, they demand financial resources. And there are financial resources. There are resources from the Amazon Fund, from the Climate Fund, and we should discuss on how to use these resources effectively at the end. It is no good to spend these resources in intermediate stages. Things that will not represent real results. So we should find ways to allocate these resources in actions that can help us to structure these programs, such as the ones we mentioned, like deforestation and firefighting. In terms of the implementation of the forestry code, something I mentioned as essential, currently the government provides the dynamic CAR analysis. So we should allow more of these registration documents, CAR, as I mentioned, to be analyzed and regulated, not only using its respective tool, but maybe doing some task forces, as it was recently done in the state of Mato Grosso. Several private entities got together and brought more people to join and go under these analysis. So when it comes to the implementation of the forestry code, we should accelerate this analysis. And there is a program that is called in Portuguese Para Valer, which is maybe translatable as for real, but still. This program allows us to see clearly the difficulties when it comes to rectification of the CR document. Sometimes producers, they don't understand how the process should be done. So we should transform all these things into digital processes. The human component will become useful when we have a technical assistance that will guide producers how to verify their status and look at the technologies that are available within the programs. And for that we have Embrapa, and there are many technologies that have already been mapped for many Brazilian biomes. And we also have economic analysis, but for us to have that we need statuses to be regulated. So this human component is very useful for helping producers to analyze these documentation and to implement sustainable practices that will come with the PRA. And talking about the inventory, at last, I think that there's a huge work to be done, especially along with the agencies that work with the Brazilian inventory. We have a tropical agriculture that is unique in the world, so we have our own technology for this kind of work. And that goes to show the potential it has and serve as an example to the rest of the world as well. So I believe that should be included in this work scope. And again, there is no single solution for all problems. I think these are issues that I'd like to bring just to provoke and instill the debate. And anyway, things cannot be solved by means of few actions, but with integrated system. And there's this very important point mentioned by Gustavo. I think we should start talking less and start doing more. I am at your disposal for any question or comment, and thank you once again for the invitation. Thank you.
Amazing, Bruno. I'd like to thank you for these insights. Brazil has a lot of people just like Bruno. You can see that he brought the problems and he pointed to many of the possible solutions, the pathways we could be taking to consider joint solutions for sustainability problems that we should overcome. It's not that we don't have a good role when it comes to sustainability that we shouldn't be improving. Thank you once again, Bruno, and we will keep on carrying this debate forward with the other presentations.
Now I'll call Vinicius Biagi. The floor is yours. I introduced you in the beginning, but I think you have great proposals for us now. Organization. So I'm going to first introduce myself. It was going to be a play, a chronic, to go back to the essence of our discussion, the essence of agriculture. So you can see here this picture, which is a region called Vale do Juruá in the Amazon, which is in evidence in the country. It's at east of Vale do Javari, a region called Encantados in the Amazon. You know that the Amazon have different biomes. There's a biome that has no walnut trees. The walnut trees that are in this place were planted, were grown, and we're going to discuss a lot of things about Embrapa here as well. So it's a social organization. We're not an NGO, although we are quote unquote classified as an NGO. We're a social organization. We are a non-governmental organization. Basically doesn't exist, and we exist because we are regulated and we are inspected by the federal public ministry and regulated by the regulatory mark of the third sector organizations. So we are a government organization. We came to govern. That's why it was created. And the assumption of foundation of the social organization, the justification is really occupy the space where the state cannot be, and that's our purpose. So since we need to discuss new paradigms here, Nova Era discusses new paradigms, and to start our conversation, in my concept, an NGO is something that was invented because social organizations have a role to occupy this space which is left empty by the state. There's an event that we held in Ribeirão Preto, which we did exactly that. We have a sister organization, which is Instituto Nova Dimensão. It's also a social organization. So it allows us to manage our assets and our country in an intelligent and cheap and simple way. Goes. I think the problem needs to be simple for us to solve it, because complex problems are not solved. Things need to be simple so that we can solve them. So just to introduce a little bit about our institute, our mission is to foster social, cultural, ecological, and economic regeneration at the individual, community, and planetary levels. At all of these dimensions, individual first, the person, then the community, and then we can influence the planet. The individual, you can see, this is myself. This is pupuya fruit. I don't know if you ever ate this fruit. It's a native fruit from Brazil. A lot of people know the palm tree, but the fruit of the tree, if you went there to the north region of the country, you already ate it with coffee or with cheese. And our vision is to be a tool for creating processes and solutions for a new era. And like Ricardo Faria said in the first presentation, he said that the Senate was thinking about the agribusiness, focusing on multinational companies, so a big pressure so that local producers were not able to produce their own inputs, their biological inputs, and so on. And in the same direction, I think we'll not be able to grow our own food, right? We have to buy it from someone who is regulated. So my name is Vinicius Antonelli. I'm the president, and I'm going to talk about what is agriculture. This is my friend Iberê. We visited this place during the pandemic. Visit Mr. Ernest. So what is agriculture? It's very hard to find one term to define agriculture. If you put it on Google and search it up, there's not a lot of details. But let's go back to the start. What is agriculture? What we teach our kids in school, elementary school, saying that agriculture is sustainable. Agriculture goes back to the human condition of not being a nomad. So we are not collectors, extractors, and we're able to grow our soil. Because when you grow things in the soil, you're not miners. We're agriculture. So this is a main issue that we go back to the past. So agriculture, in my view, is harvesting the sun. Is the art of harvesting the sun. So you can see one individual playing his role in the ecosystem was to optimize the processes. The planet doesn't need humans for anything. We need the planet, and in this case, there's a big correlation between humans and the forests. The forest needs the humans, and the humans need the forest. We're in the top of the chain, right? So that's the story that is told. To have human life, we need large-sized animals. To have large-sized animals, we need the forests, fruits, and this is a basic condition. So for me, agriculture is a synonym of sustainability. If this is not the case, then it cannot be called agriculture. We will be still collectors. We will still be extracting from the earth. So maybe we need to take 2 steps back and discuss this the essence a little bit more. Professor who presented, a great friend of mine, he like him, I was born in a farm. I'm part of the ecosystem, just like he said he is. As he mentioned, we need to have a different look. We need to feel. It took him many years to work to understand. I don't want to understand. I want to feel. Before Mr. Leontino Balbo was born, my grandfather would say in Sertãozinho, thanks to that, we arrived, and discovering vinasse was discarded in the river. So in an empirical way, this is a story that comes from the sector of agriculture. In an empirical way, we found out that vinasse had a role that it played, and it was very interesting. So let me try to go back to my presentation. Here are the conservation units in Brazil. So I showed this map as kind of a provocation, so that if agriculture is synonym of sustainability, would it be the utility of conservation? Because you produce and conserve. This is an assumption. Otherwise, it's not agriculture. It's agro mining, and we need to work with this, in fact. And one thing that I think it's really cool to comment here regarding conservation, which is something that the world said that the Amazon is the lung of the world. I don't agree with that. I believe that the lung of the world are the oceans. We can't compare the production of oxygen and carbon sequestering done by the oceans with the Amazon. So there is a question for Embrapa. Is there any studies showing about the territory of 8,000 kilometers of coastlines where no one talks about that the agriculture and livestock activities don't talk about fishing. There's not a lot of regulation, and this type of fishing using nets, it's much more harmful than deforestation, for example. So we focus a lot on deforestation, and we kind of forget that Amazon, the forests, are the heart of the world. They produce water. They produce forests so that we have large-sized animals, so that we can have humans. So this is my provocation. So here I'm going to talk about a little bit about syntropic agriculture, about Ernest Gotch, which means the individual in the forest. So we can see here this was a degraded area. It was a farm called Fugidos da Terra Seca, and currently it's called Olhos d'Água. It's an example of regeneration in our country. And you can see here at the end, if I could point it with, you can see that here in the top corner, you can see a zoom of the area, the top right corner. You can see how it has been regenerated. Deforestation is not bad if it's not used for agro mining, if it's used for restoring. So we need to restore, and we need to work by restoring and occupying these territories. It's very important, because otherwise we can't have these reserves. For what are these reserves? People are starving. The problem is in the cities. The problem is here. There's always a new building coming up in the sky, and we can barely move, and we have a lot of degraded areas that are not productive areas. So, for example, 30% of the areas for our permanent protection areas, we don't need to protect them from anything, because we're not doing anything wrong there. That's what I learned, that it's better to prevent than remedy. If you need to remedy something, there's credits and compensation, and then the problem starts to be complex. So I think it's a philosophic thinking. The main input of agriculture is knowledge, and that is why that we need the social organizations. We need to educate our sons and ourselves, and allow us to gather knowledge and look at things with a different perspective. So now I'm going to talk about the community. This is one of the communities that we work at Vale do Rio Juruá. This is a community that is a zoom of this other picture. I'm going back to the beginning. You can see here at the beginning of our presentation, this is the image. Some people look at this image, and this is where they had the rubber extraction, which brought this seeds to Malaysia, and these people went to the field, and they tried to do some monoculture, and I never heard anyone talking about that. But from 1950s to the 1990s, possibility of the Amazon being more reforested than deforested is huge. My understanding is that we can have humans living in the forest. We are made to live in the forest. So let's go to the Amazon, not only to visit, but let's go live there. Let's go to everywhere, to Brazil, to our house, to our home. So all of these communities, they can only have these communities if we have the individuals, because everyone work together. And at the end, myself as a young person, one of the youngest to speak here today, what we want is to raise our kids without having to explore anyone and without being explored. That's what it's all about. And so the cooperative cocoa fruit here is a commodity, and it's a plant that requires a forest. We are discovering cocoa and chocolate and cocoa honey. If you never tried it, try it, learn about it. There are things that were discarded. We were throwing gold away in the mud. So there's a lot to do, but there's a long path to run. God is great, and in our country, we live in a tropical country that we need to assess this reality. Now, let's talk about bioeconomy. I think this is the real blockchain. If you didn't understand yet what is the blockchain, what is it all about? It's a solution to give some ballast to the energy. Because first we invented agriculture, then we invented the cities, and then we created money. So money, economy, the finance, it's always been a way. It's not the end of the story. It's a means to an end. So you don't see a lot of graphics in my presentation, because that is not the focus of my presentation here today. If you need any more detailing, we can discuss this later. But this is a few examples of companies that we've been working with. Viva Floresta is a company that is an e-commerce marketplace that allows us to gather all productions and add value and direct the agriculture to the internal economy, to the people, to talk to our people. And now we have a few of the works that we developed with Blink Bioscience. The same way my grandfather, Maurílio, found a good use for vinasse that was discarded in the rivers. We created Blink Bioscience, which is it's a company that uses yeast from ethanol fermentation. And we have Supertech, which optimizes combustion, because Blink Bioscience and Supertech related to our history. We are here talking about energy assets, right? And we are discussing here saying that there's no other way of producing energy that is not by the use of photosynthesis. So that's why here I mentioned producing and preserving. So we need to produce and preserve. These are synonyms. We need to do both. We cannot produce without preserving. We cannot compensate or offset. We need to go to the field. This is an example of an experiment that we made. It's one of the focus of our institute. Production of foods and foodstuff between the tree lines. There are some other pictures that I was not able to show. We had an experiment with cotton as well. We were able to have produce cotton within the tree lines above national average. But the issues of agriculture, if you're a producer, you know, direct planting, handling of the soil, these are the issues that we're still working with. We're still working with war machinery, old technology. I'm talking to Embrapa. Maybe we can have a project to to use the military in the agricultural business. We don't need missile or bombs or ships or vessels. We need to plant beans. We need to plant rice. So why not direct these efforts? This is sovereignty, national security, occupying these territories. So my time is over. Just to wrap up here, a little bit of our institute, Marílio Biagi. There are two quotes here. He said that I believe a lot in the ability of men. The most important task of a company is to train people. The administrator who hopes to find man-made will fail. So the importance of working with education, with memory, and going back to our roots. And Roberto Antonelli Filho, that's the importance of the name of Antonelli. He's one of the greatest workers in Amazon. He was coordinator of IBAMA and SOS Amazonia. You probably heard about my uncle. He was a brilliant scientist. And these are the two bases, preserving and producing. And they are synonyms. I would like to say here another sentence here that is from a great professor, Professor Ernest. Let's pay our debt. Let's pay our debts. Because his famous sentence, his quote is, let's plant water, but now let's pay the debts. That's the message. Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank Bill and Família Nastadi for the invite to be here today. They were really close families. We've been working together, and thank you all. And remind people from Renovabio of our energy sources from photosynthesis. And we were a little bit pissed with photosynthesis. Let's stop war. Let's start making peace. Let's go into a peace agriculture. Let's make things simple. Let's manage what we really need to manage. That's it. Thank you very much.
Muito bom, parabéns.
Very good. Vinicius carries the name of our panel, producing and preserve. So, and Antonelli is the last name of one of the people who fought the most for the environmental preservation in Brazil. So, to wrap up the final presentation in our panel, I'd like to invite Christian Lohbauer, President of CropLife Brazil, to give his presentation. Thank you, Gustavo. Well, by the end of the day, the last one to speak in the panel, well, there are advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is that you have spoke of everything, and the disadvantage is that I should be quick in my presentation so that I don't become boring. When Luis and he presented the GAF project, and the subject was about sustainability and food production and security, I thought to myself that it was the ideal moment for CropLife to present itself and sponsor the event, and also provide contributions for the overall reflection. This is what we intend to do, and I was requested to join this panel, which deals on approaching the challenges and opportunities of sustainable agriculture. Gustavo has already made a very good introduction on the use of land in Brazil. We saw the material that Evaristo developed that was perfected by Institute. Everyone is using in the world, should be knowing about it. If you don't, well, I know that there are lots of foreigners here today, and that's a good sign. We should be working on these issues systematically. And Bruno's presentation was complete. He gave the diagnosis of the entire scenario. What are the problems we are facing? And the basic theme is that the Brazilian agriculture is already sustainable. We presented facts, numbers, and very good information. We work with sustainability. We do have problems. We have illegal mining, deforestation. Yes, we do. We have illegal logging. Sure, we do have. There are people who don't employ good production practices. Absolutely. But the agribusiness has been built around a sustainable view. Bruno mentioned all the aspects that are important. The ABC plan, direct planting, captation of nitrogen in the soil, the use of animal waste, everything has already been part of the conversation. This has been our reality, and the world hasn't received this information in an organized manner, and we are the ones, we are absolutely almost being obliged to do that in an organized manner. Panagro, along with Apex and CropLife, all these companies and agencies are working towards that with Europeans and Americans, but it takes a little time. There's a lot of politics involved, but I'd like to say that Bruno's presentation was complete. He also gave some solutions of public policies that should be applied and are not being applied. Resources, firefight brigade, equipment. So the diagnosis is ready for Brazil. And then Vinicius gave a very surprising presentation because it's quite different from what we are used to be seen here. So he used a different language, a new presentation, a new approach, a proposal. If you allow me, give an adjective. Please don't offend with it, but this is a sort of a laboratorial proposal. Like, look at how many things we could be doing that we don't know how they could be. Take a look at the universe of things we could be doing. We could be doing a lot of things without destroying other beings and the nature. And I agree absolutely. And Gush's method is presented at my son's school, and I think that, yes, it's a very good method. And I told at my son's school that there was someone who was presenting the Gush method with organic food, productive property, and so on. What about large-scale agriculture that has to respond to these issues and these issues? This is something that we can't avoid. Growing population and increasing demand. These are data related to the limited universe. What is sustainability after all? The resources are limited, period. You can't contest that. How can we use resources wisely so that can maintain life and biodiversity and nature in a somewhat regenerative condition? How can we do that? We should try to meet these challenges all at the same time. We can't have a diagnosis like the analysis that was done by Gustavo, the diagnosis that was done by Bruno, and having an avant-garde knowledge. We can't have all these things without facing such an emergential reality that is this. The nature environments are being degraded, the population is on the rise, and people have to eat. When we have to deal with all this stuff at the same time. And one of the answers is quite typical to the industry that I represent. And the answer comes from technology. And this is something that has been left unsaid to my humble presentation. But growing population, increasing demand, the responses are in the technology. And technology means a lot. And some of the ideas that are mentioned by Vinicius, they are technology, but the technology that we represent is the vegetal development for the production of crops and consequently attack by microorganisms that attack plants, insects, fungi, weeds that compete against the main plant, and along with that, biotechnology, the entire universe of genetic engineering and genetic editing that could make better seeds, make more productive completely new plants with its maximum capacities, transforming the genetic design of plants, and finally a new universe that are the bioagrochemicals. These are the new frontier, together with other solutions, so that we can have all these integrated technologies that can give answers to these permanent challenges. So things, they are not exclusive here. This is the first step we should be taking to, try to end this binary view that we have currently. Things are not exclusive of one another. We should find the right path for the collective benefit. Trying to answer these questions, I will skip many of these nice sentences, but well, innovation, best technology practices, and efficiency in production that can become increasingly higher. It is something that relates to what you presented, and it's something that relates to the 100 bags of soybeans. I know that we are at an average of 60, but still we are trying to do all these things at the same time. This is where the answers should come from. Well, this is the diagram I mentioned before. Well, here we have the Brazilian position. We are protagonists. We are at the avant-garde of these conversations. The world won't be able to solve its problems if Brazil doesn't position itself in a proactive manner. And here, there is a sort of a mix of the entire conversation. Concentric circles that include tools, technologies, and practices. So our entity represents just a part of that. What we sell as CropLife. We are an industry of pesticides and agrochemicals, and we work also with the combined biotech, and we work on the technology side from the standpoint of equipment. I can't quite really remember the word. No, if that can be paired. I'm not sure how the calculation is done, if that's possible, after all. But still, that can be discussed. And finally, the combination of technology is what makes us reach the answers to the challenges we have. Specifically, on the point of new technologies, there is the challenge of public policies that was not mentioned by Bruno, and I'd like to add that. And it comes to the approval of new technologies within the Brazilian regulatory system. The system of biological products that is seen with a lot more empathy, and we have seen much more often the number of biological products being approved, and there are the chemical products that have chemical molecules that are much more difficult in their approval, and it seems to be a problem, in my opinion, because I think we should have much more agility and capability in the approval for chemicals and not that much for biological products, since they don't represent such a problem, really. I know that you mentioned some multinational companies and etc. There is no such a thing as multinational defending their own market, in my view. I think there is something that is called intellectual property, and here we can't, move things around, so if people have their farm and want to set it on fire, they can do it. But what they can't do, what they aren't allowed to do, is to get a biological commercial product, copy it, and spray it without paying the rights of the company that holds the intellectual property. There are Brazilian companies that make these kinds of products, and good ones, effective products, growing 50% a year. But there is no regulation for respecting intellectual property as it should. And there is a sanitary issue that is much more severe in my view. There is no market protection, and the industry keep on saying that they want things to be done
in their way, but no, there should be an isonomy really here. These practices that don't follow the regulation, they can generate a sanitary imbalance. We are working with bacteria, with viruses here, so there should be some regulation. So, like, it's not about multinationals that want to prevent farmers and producers from using their own homemade solutions, but it is interesting for our industry that those who make the production of biologic solutions in the right way, with the right tools and the right process, will become a member of these associations. So a bioplant that is well set and good to go, that's interesting. And these products, they are cheaper than agrochemicals, so we should be facing these reality in the market. So I think that we should be considering this market aspect, and this was mentioned in this parallel conversation with the government, the president and ministers. I think we should be looking at the national interest. This development of our sector is something of national interest, regardless of political parties. So if producers have the chance to choose from more options, it is much better. Otherwise, we won't have that because we are not competent enough when it comes to regulatory issues. And finally, I think that I've presented most of the ideas I wanted, but it is the most important thing about GAF and this event that we are having here, and I'm such privileged to wrap up this session. It is that this forum can present its brand, its proposals. There are 50 companies that are part of CropLife. There are 40 that work with seeds and 26 that work with agrochemicals. So it's not about taking over the world, really. I think that we are all together in the same institution, concerned about the accessibility of technology to rural producers. So I really would like to praise the Nova Era institution that it should become a business, in my view. I think if it becomes a business, we are allowing the following chapters to be written, and they are the production of food. And I mean, it's not an exaggeration. We have this in Brazil as our vocation. The world needs Brazil. We should not be, making self-promotion, but really, Brazil should adapt to it, should be responsible enough to do it in a good way, with sustainability, with all the data that were mentioned by Gustavo, with all the policies that were questioned by Bruno, with all the opportunities that you pointed to us in your presentation. They are pretty much very welcome, and I believe this is what I wanted to bring you in such an improvised way, with less slides and more of conversation. And if there is an opportunity for debate, it will be great for us to talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we wrapped up with a great presentation here, this panel. And now we have approximately 10 minutes for a small debate here, a small discussion. I had one question for each one of you. I'm sure I'll not be able to ask them all, but I chose one question that may be answered by all of you. I think Bruno talked about the public policy part of it, with some directions to improve the image of Brazilian agriculture and livestock production. Vinicius showed spectacular examples of syntropic regenerative agriculture, and Christian mentioned a specific point about technology that were able to increase the competitiveness of our agricultural segments with more quality and better products for the consumer markets. So my question for all of you is, We have three ways of increasing food production anywhere in the world. There's only three ways of increasing food production in the world: increasing productivity, increasing the grown area, or intensify the use of the land. Which one do you believe is the best way? Do you believe we can have sustainability on these three stages, or we need to select one or two of them to be able to increase our production of food and energy in Brazil? Bruno, let's start with you. You were the first one to speak, so you're now the first one to speak as well. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate my colleagues for their presentations. And Gustavo, I think your question, the main answer to it is that we can have gains in productivity and intensification of land use. The area is not discarded as well. I think productivity is the main factor because of these things that we discussed during presentations. Develop better technology. Christian brought a lot of inputs regarding the subject that we can make it scale up in the field. So I would stick with productivity, but the Brazilian legislation allows expansion of area depending on the biomes, and maybe in the future, depending on the demand of food that we're going to have in the world, and depending on the level of technology that we'll have. Year by year, we have evolutions, but this is not discarded, right? So I believe that the main factor is, and there is space in Brazil for incrementing productivity, especially in livestock. We see that bovine livestock production, it's been improving, and it has conditions to evolve even more. So to be go to the point here, I would stick to productivity, but without discarding the other two pillars. This the economic context will show how to calibrate each of these options. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you for your answer. Vinicius, from your perspective of a more synthropic agriculture, more in contact with the nations, do you believe in the three options as well? Yes, I believe in agriculture. Like I said, this binary thing. I'm an Olympic athlete, and we play aquatic polo. We played the Junior Pan American Games together. I played the pre-Olympic Games as well, and it's really rich to be able to discuss this. We can understand each other. So productivity, increased area, and or intensification of land use, right? So I think intensification of land use and availability of area to work with people. I think scaling up is one thing. One person can work 1,000 hectares, but 1,000 people can work 1,000 hectares. And as a good Italian, small properties there have high added value. So working with adding value to the production is also something that is really important. For example, there was a point that sugar was cheaper than sand in France. There are water concessions that they have 800,000 liters of water to produce sugar, and the sugar is cheaper than water. Then why doesn't he just sell water, right? So these are some of the questions that we need to ask. I believe that, for example, I'll give you an example here. Like Bruno mentioned, you in Embrapa talk about the native lands, the native indigenous lands. If they have the lands and they can't work on these lands, they can't produce anything on these lands, and they can't just grow anything on those lands. So they need to be preserved and protected. So these indigenous people, they are able to do it. They can understand it. They are Brazilians, after all, right? Why shouldn't they have access to all the data and information and be able to work with them? So I think that this question extends to the communities, to the societies. Make people produce more, have productive landscaping in the cities, not only agrotherapy. Instead of going to therapy, go work with in the soil. Let's grow some trees and some plants. It has an antidepressive effect. Wonderful, Vinicius. It's a very different view on the agricultural segment that really needs to be considered, right? Yes, I'm going to stick with productivity. I'm not an agronomist. I'm not a veterinarian. I didn't study at ESOC or Viçosa or Lavras. I'm an intruder here. But the more and more I came into this business, the more I learn with the people I work with. And if I was 20 years old today, I was going to study biotechnology, because I think that it's a science that is so wonderful, it's so extraordinary, and you need a lot of responsibility to study and manipulate the genes. But it's so impressive. It's so impressive what we can do with that to create, for example, a rice seed that survives 15 days underwater, or corn seeds that can face the water stress that we have today. In the Caatinga region, for example, being able to produce soy there with 600 milliliters a year. This is all with the seeds. This universe of biotechnology is the new frontier of knowledge, of the new sciences all around the world. Biotech is it. Needs to do with a lot of responsibility, of course, because it can generate some confusion there. I don't think human genetics, maybe sometimes we get scared about that, but with plants and the consequences on a production of foods, I think it's wonderful. So I think it's productivity. If we have space to grow here in Brazil, 90 million hectares of lands that we can use, wonderful. I don't know how long this will take, but I see that productivity by means of biotech, this is the big thing about of all of our discussion here. Yes, three views that are different for the same question. This is the great summary for this panel today. We're able to discuss sustainability and the role of production inside sustainability with different views, but synergistic, always thinking on how we can produce more and preserve even more. So I'd like to thank all of you, and wrapping up our panel here, I'd like to thank the organizers of our event, Dr. Plinio, Luis Felipe, and everyone. You allowed us great opportunity to discuss these ideas. I would like to have at least one more day with each one of you here. I think we'll have these opportunities. We can schedule other discussions in the future, but I'll leave here today convinced that Brazil will still be a protagonist in terms of production and preservation, because we have good people, we have good thinking minds here, thinking strategically, and thinking about what Vinicius said. We're in a military area. I'm an intruder in the military area. Embrapa is the only civil entity within that region, and to win a war, you need three things. You need a strategy, you need tactics, and skill. And I think the strategy has been discussed here today. We have strategic people and strategic agencies and entities that are able to really direct our good actions for the future of the agricultural segment. And I'm sure that on the other end, the Brazilian rural producer will have all the weapons and the tools required to execute all this technology that have been researched and all the strategy that have been discussed about the future of sustainability in Brazil. They will be connected and they'll be able to execute more and more sustainable agriculture. Congratulations again to everyone. Great event. What a great day. And I think that tomorrow we'll be here again together for new panels and new discussions. Thanks, everyone. Christian, Vinicius, Bruno from Brasília, and big hug to all. We'll see you tomorrow.